Okay, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce Joe Kay.
Well, I'm Joe Class. Thank God I'm an alcoholic. I was trying to figure it out. I'm in my 28th year of OA, my 31st year of Al-Anon and NA, my 36th year of sobriety, my 41st year of AA, and my 51st year of marriage, and my 79th year of financial insecurity. You know, it's good to be here. I want to congratulate you on this fine place that you're putting together. It shows a lot of love, and it's going to be a wonderful place to come. I was the third member of the first Danville group. There was a woman named Ms., and a guy she would bring in a wheelchair named Clyde, and then I showed up, and 3.5 years later there were about 11 meetings a week, and now there's a few more than that. But this is a home country for me. I think I went to the first meeting ever in Martinez. I know I did in Crockett, and AA seemed to survive a long time after that. So I'm awfully glad that you invited me to come here tonight. I feel at home here. Now, I gave out a few statistics there. My 35th year of AA, my birthday of the 35th year ended in December 23rd, 1997. So this is my 36th year, but I haven't had a 36-year birthday. I don't want anybody to get confused about that, because sometimes people give me a chip or something that's a year off. But this fellowship must have changed my life, because when I first came, my wife nagged me into it. I had just finished introducing top 40 rock and roll radio to the state of California. I tried to get the stations in LA to do it, and I couldn't find one that would let me. They said their listeners were too sophisticated for rock and roll. And so I did it in San Bernardino. And then I went out and made a survey of the market for 4 days. And during that 4 days, I got 17 parking tickets while I was in the car. And it worked, you know. The rock and roll worked. But I remember having a drink in Redlands, and I went right out and threw it up and came in and ordered another drink toward the end of the day on Friday. And the guy said, "I'll pour you one, but he says, if you drink it, you're crazy." And so I didn't drink it. And I drove all the way back to Burbank, where we were temporarily living, until I could find a house in San Bernardino. And in Burbank, I had the dry heaves. I spun out twice on the way back on the San Bernardino freeway. Once was right down in the bottleneck. And I guess I was lucky as usual. You know, I'm a fighter pilot who crashed 4 times. You know, every one of them was a spiritual experience. I didn't want to be the best fighter pilot in the world. I wanted to be the oldest. But I brought that same attitude into AA, because when I came to AA, I had cirrhosis. I'd been released from 2 hospitals. They both told me the same thing, that I was going to die in less than a year. And none of those doctors had ever heard of anybody surviving cirrhosis. And nobody in AA had heard of it either. I don't think, at least nobody I talked to, say, "I got cirrhosis," they'd say, "Oh, well, that's too bad. This program will make it easier for you to pass on." Well, since then I have met hundreds of people in AA that used to have cirrhosis, maybe thousands. But I've never met anybody outside of AA that used to have cirrhosis. Not one. And I used to have to argue with doctors. I remember the first argument I got into was at Kaiser. They said you couldn't have cirrhosis. Nobody survives cirrhosis. And then I'd have him feel around. He said, yeah, I can feel the scars. He says, I don't know how it happened. I don't know how it happened either. My first experience was in Burbank. My wife came out the morning after I got back from that experience at Redlands, and I had the dry heaves. I hadn't been able to sleep. I knew I was in day 1 of 5 days of absolute wakeful hell with spasms and all kinds of things happening, and I wouldn't be able to get a drink down. I was a periodic dry. Every once in a while, I got so sick I couldn't get another drink down, and then it'd take me 5 days to get well enough to start again. And that's all I wanted, just so I could start again. And she came in where I had set myself in a separate bedroom because I made a lot of noise. I groaned and maybe screamed, I don't know. But it bothered my family. And so she came in and said, have you ever heard of AA? And I said, I've heard of it, but I don't know anything about it. I know everything there was to know about alcoholism and nothing at all about AA. Well, there were only 250,000 people in AA then, and it was a disgrace to be a member. Even the members thought so. You couldn't get a job if they found out you were in AA, you know. You couldn't get credit. You got to realize that when this program started, how long ago was it? 63 years ago, that there were 35 states in this United States who sterilized alcoholics. Think about that. We were hopeless. Old wives' tale. Parents used to tell their kids, stay away from him. He's the living dead. Why? Because he couldn't find any place to live except the cemetery. That's where the Dracula stories came from. He was an alcoholic. Bloodsuckers, huh? Well, it does that. And everybody thinks the alcoholic is doing that to other people, and nobody's sicker than the alcoholic. You know, nobody tried to get that sick. We didn't know yet that you were born an alcoholic. You know, nobody but an alcoholic could possibly drink enough to become one. Who the hell else could get that much booze down? If you're not an alcoholic, you can't become one. We didn't know then that it was genetic. Now they know it's genetic. My sponsor, who a lot of you know, Dr. Earl Marsh, he is the man who actually got the AMA to accept that alcoholism was a disease, and at the time he proved to them that it was 83% genetic and 100% 83% hereditary and 100% genetic. They didn't have any scientific studies, but they had done studies with rats and things. And they discovered that if you had alcoholic parents, you probably were going to be an alcoholic. Well, I had alcoholic parents. Both of my parents were alcoholics. You've got something growing around here that got to me. I don't have a cold. The fact of the matter is that I thought alcoholic behavior was normal behavior because I grew up in that kind of behavior, and my father was a highly respected man because he made home brew during the Depression that was good, you know, and he knew how to make gin in the bathtub, and I used to help him, and my parents thought they ought to teach me to grow up and be successful like my father. And he was so respected because he made good home brew and good gin and had the name of a bootlegger. It's like the kind of respect that somebody gets today for growing good pot and having a good connection. Is there anybody with more respect than that? So I grew up to respect alcohol, and I thought it was a way of life. I also thought that the occupations I picked required drinking. That's why I drank so much. I was a college student. Everybody knows college students drink. I joined a fraternity. Everybody knows fraternity people drink. I studied journalism and became a newspaper reporter. Everybody knows that newspaper reporters drink. Right? I wanted to be an author. Everybody knows that authors drink. 5 Nobel laureates, all Americans, were all alcoholics, none of whom ever recovered. I think if you recover, you haven't got a chance of winning the Nobel Prize. I've written 9 books and I'm not very close to it. So the whole idea of being an alcoholic wasn't such a bad idea. President Roosevelt ran on a slogan of bring back light wine and beer. You know, alcoholism was against the law. Alcohol was against the law. It was just like cocaine or marijuana or heroin is against the law today. Alcohol was just that much against the law when I was a kid. And it became legal in 1933 because Roosevelt ran a campaign that said, bring back light wine and beer and happy days will be here again. And I've been a Democrat ever since. You know, it was going to end crime. There wouldn't be any more bootlegging. Al Capone would be through. There wouldn't be any income tax because the taxes on alcohol would pay for education, highways, everything, you know. It was the patriotic thing to do, to drink. It was going to get us out of the Depression. And then, of course, I became a fighter pilot. Everybody knows that fighter pilots drink. I was establishing a pattern of being very careful in my career choices to make sure they required drinking. Not just accepted it, but required drinking. I was a Yank in the RAF, a volunteer. In the squadron I was in, if you didn't get drunk tonight, you were transferred the next day. That was a hard and fast rule. And anybody that didn't get drunk tonight was transferred out of the outfit the next day. And it was a great fighter squadron. You know, if you're going to go out and get killed the next day, it's not a bad idea to get drunk tonight and not think about the next day. We used to go out on the dawn patrol, which was never called the dawn patrol by the fighter pilots. We call it the bird turd patrol. I'd go out on the bird turd patrol, smoke oxygen all the way across the English Channel, get well, we'd come back, go into the officer's mess and have a drink. That afternoon, we'd go out again. That night, we'd get drunk or we'd be transferred the next morning. Some of our best fighter pilots had to be lowered into the cockpit and strapped in. They were smoking oxygen so they could get clear enough headed to take off without cracking up. And they'd go over and shoot down some Germans. And we were good at it. Top scoring squadron in the Royal Air Force, the whole Royal Air Force. For 3 months, we were all washed out of the American Air Force. They didn't understand us. They all said we didn't have the discipline and the qualifications to be fighter pilots. Everybody in the Eagle Squadron was washed out or couldn't pass the physical or was too old or too young or some damn thing. We weren't eligible to fly in the United States. And so in October 1942, they couldn't get together a squadron or a group over there that could keep their fighter pilots alive more than one mission. So they decided to buy us back from the RAF. We were ineligible to fly in the U.S. Air Force. Bunch of drunken fighter pilots, and the United States paid Britain $33,000 apiece for all of us washouts. And we had a hell of a celebration. We took over London for a week. We made dates with every woman we saw, so Every night there were a couple of thousand women show up at the Savoy Hotel. And they all had a good time. At least we thought they did. We don't. I can't swear to that. How can you drink that much and know what the hell is going on, right? So I transferred to the American Air Force, and I went down to North Africa where there was nothing to drink, and 6 months later I was shot down, captured by the Germans. It was my fourth plane crash. This time I knew I was going to die, and it really was a spiritual experience. I was on fire. I couldn't get the canopy open. I couldn't bail out. I couldn't see out because of the smoke, and my boots were burning. And I was down near the ground, and there were still 4 German fighter planes to deal with. And I'd been out of ammunition for 20 minutes. And I wondered what God was going to look like. And I thought, this is going to be the greatest adventure of all. Everybody wonders what God looks like. I quit flying the damn thing. It was all over. As certain as I'm standing here, I was a dead man. The damn thing hit the ground, broke in half, took the canopy off. I started unhooking stuff. I had so much experience from 3 previous plane crashes that I got out faster than ever, and the damn thing exploded. I ran 50 feet. They were shooting at me on the ground. I fell down because I was shot in both legs, my left arm, 27 holes in my butt. And I fell down on the ground, and they kept shooting. They made 8 passes. 4 planes, 2 passes each, until they ran out of ammunition. Kicking up dirt and stuff, and I'm shaking my fist at them. You stupid bastards, can't you even kill a man lying on the ground? And I was angry because I was ready to go. And God didn't take me. And I didn't know what was going on. I had a spiritual experience. I had given up and won. I didn't understand that then. It was years later in AA before I finally figured it out, that the reason that plane got down and let me out was because I quit flying it and let God have it. And that's what we do here, isn't it? We quit flying it, let go of the controls, and let God take over. And if we don't, we die. Most of us. I saw a study recently that said 4%, 1 out of every 25 AA members is able to stay sober the rest of his life without working the steps. Those aren't good enough odds for me. 1 out of 25. I wrote a book called The 12 Steps to Happiness that's been around for a long time now. And there are 13 or 14 groups in the United States where the only requirement for membership is that they have been sober at least 20 years and never have worked the steps. And they're working the steps. And they all say the same thing. They say the same thing as the man in Des Moines said a couple of years ago. He said, I've been sober 49 years. I've been working the steps for 9 months, and it has turned my life around. He's wealthy. He owns a meat packing plant. He said if he died before his 50th year, he left instructions to have him put in a meat locker and preserved on ice until his 50th birthday in AA. And he worked the steps, and now he's 52 years sober. Last 2.5 years without having to resist alcohol. When somebody said, what's happened? What's different? How did it turn your life around? That's what he answered. I no longer have to resist alcohol. That's all the steps do. I got to write a 12 by 12 for one of the other fellowships, and it was immediately attacked by people that didn't like me using any certain language. In other words, anything that, it happened to be people that wanted to control the behavior. And I said, if you're powerless over it, you can't control it, that's all. That's all it means, isn't it? What the hell else does powerless mean? Except inability to control. But people who don't want to let go of control oftentimes can't do the steps. I can do the steps in a hurry. I'll do the 12 steps for you. I think I can do them in about a minute and a half. Step 1, I'm powerless over everything and I can't manage anything. Step 2, maybe God can manage things better than I can. Step 3, God take charge. Step 4, I'm all fucked up. Step 5, I admit I'm all fucked up. Step 6, maybe God can straighten me out. Step 7, okay, God, straighten me out. Step 8, I haven't harmed anybody today, so I can skip step 9. Step 10, I'm fucked up again, and I admit it. Step 11, God, make me feel like doing what you want me to do today. Step 12, I just did it. Now, can I go on a desert island with no water and not drink alcohol? You're damn right. I'd rather eat shit. Because I'm working the steps. If I'm working the steps, it's impossible to drink. It's that simple. I don't want it. I mean, honest to God, it's repulsive. What Bill said was alcohol is not our problem. Self-centeredness, selfishness, and self-centeredness, we think, is the root of our problems. We recoil from alcoholism, we recoil from alcohol as from a flame. You know, if you're not working the steps, you got to use willpower. If you are working the steps, you got no choice. You can't drink. You'll recoil from it. It doesn't take willpower to pull your hand out of a flame. Try it. It would take an incredible amount of willpower if the ironic case should arrive where a person working the 12 steps were required somehow to take a drink. It would take more willpower than most people have. I don't think it could be done. So in order to take a drink, what do I have to do to get the choice to drink back? I got to work the steps backwards. Step 12, I got to go spiritually asleep. I got to stop working the principles of the 12 steps. I got to stop delivering this 12-step message. Step 11, I got to start praying for specific things again. Make up a shopping list for God. Make a servant out of God. Tell God what I want Him to do for me. Step 10, I got to take the whole world's inventory and point out why they're wrong about everything, and it's given me a bad time. Step 9, I got to expect other people to make amends to me. Step 8, I got to make a shit list of people who owe me amends. Step 7, I got to figure that God expects me to remove my own shortcomings and start removing them myself with the talent that God gave to me. Step 6, I've got to come to believe that's why God gave me so much talent, was so I could manage my own life. Step 5, I've got to admit that what's wrong with me is I haven't been working hard enough to manage my own life. Step 4, I've got to make a list of things that you did that are causing me trouble. I got to take your inventory. Step 3, I got to take full charge of my own life. Step 2, I've got to believe that that's what God expects me to do. Step 1, I got to admit I've got the power now to run my own life, and only now do I have the power to lift up a drink and drink it. So now all I got to do is figure out which way I'm working these steps, forward or backward. You know, a lot of people can't do the steps. I used to think a lot of people were too stubborn or something. That's not it. Bill thought that they were dishonest. That's not it. Bill was trying to figure it out. You know, he said self-centeredness, selfishness, self-centeredness, self-will run riot. He wasn't a professional writer. He wrote a marvelous, inspired book. But I'm a writer. I get things down into simple language. Selfishness, self-centeredness, self-control. What is that all about? It's control. That's what it's all about. Control, the insistence on being in charge, is self-centeredness. Selfishness is wanting to run my own show. Maybe I'll let God help me, but I'm only going to pray for help. I'm not going to say, God, take charge. I have a son who died 3.5, almost 4 years ago. He went to 2,000 AA meetings. He went through 12 treatment programs. He was unable to give up control. When he was a little kid, he couldn't stand to see somebody putting a screw into something. He would want to take over and do it. He couldn't watch anybody else doing anything without wanting to do it himself. And it killed him. It finally killed him. Just turned 35. He was not a dishonest man. He said, I can't let go. He said, I can't go for that God stuff. What he meant is, he believed in God, but he couldn't let God run the show. He was totally honest about it. Not many of us get the chance to watch day by day as someone dies of this disease. And the last months of this disease, the last years, are pretty horrible. I've been into so many emergency rooms, intensive care units, jails, visiting my own kid, you know. One of his ways of getting straight for a while was do something really stupid. My daughter and I were talking about it tonight. She pointed this out to me. She says, he didn't steal a pack of cigarettes or a beer because he needed a pack of cigarettes or a beer. It was the only way he could get to jail and stay clean for a while. And I know that's true. I know that's true. Because he was a model prisoner. He would say, I'm not going to do what these other fuckheads here do. I'm going to do this right. He was a model prisoner. In and out of jail all the time. In and out of recovery programs. He could recite the big book forwards and backward, but he couldn't do it. And it made me realize how lucky, how incredibly lucky those of us who can do it are. Because nothing but luck gives us the ability to do the 12 steps. Most people can't do it. A lot of people in this room tonight will not be able to do the 12 steps. And I feel so sorry about that. But I don't blame anybody. It's not their fault. They're honest. They just can't let go and let God. Why in the world would we encourage anybody to admit that they are powerless over their own lives if they don't believe it? That's dishonest. You know, it's like Bill said about booze. If you think you can drink again, he tells you a routine. Go out and try it. He also told us not to chase them down. Let them try it. Because that's the only goddamn way they can find out. They can't find out because we tell them. It doesn't do any good to talk to a drinking alcoholic. We can't change them. The only thing that can happen is if they are lucky enough to find out they can't do it. And the only thing that can make us recover is if we are lucky enough to have the capacity to give up control and let God be in charge. Nothing else works. Except for that 1 out of 25 who will feel that he has to get up at meetings, particularly discussion meetings, and point out that he doesn't work the steps. All he does is go to a lot of meetings and don't drink in between. And that may work for him, but it won't work for 24 out of the 25 people he's talking to. So it's not a good message. And how many of us would want so hard to be the 1 in 25 that doesn't have to give up control? And we think control is so goddamn important. We can't live without it. Well, most of us can. We can't live with it. So it'll kill us. And it's not pretty. I'm going to frighten somebody, I hope. The only guy I ever sat with and lived with while he was dying was my son. And what's it like to die of alcoholism? There comes a point when you can't get up out of the bed, when you can't hit the bedpan or the urinal, where somebody has to wipe you, where you can't even spit. They have to put a pump to get the spit out of your mouth. And you think you're going to die tomorrow, and you're months away from dying. You're going to do this for week after week after week, and have people pick you up and carry you into a shower. And the doctor says, give him alcohol, he's going to die anyway. We got to use something. That's the poor guy who isn't so talented that with willpower he can turn down the first drink. The first thing I learned in AA was any damn fool can turn down one drink. I only have to turn down one drink, the first one. If I don't take the first one, I can't get drunk. Well, that's true. And I, with my incredible willpower, was able to go 5 years and 8 months wishing every waking moment and most of my sleeping moments, day in, day out, day after day, month after month, year after year, 5 years and 8 months, wishing every second I could have that drink and using my strength of character to turn it down. What a way to live. And when people say, how's it going today, Joe? I'd say, great. Isn't this a wonderful program? Did I want anybody to know how miserable I was? I wouldn't let you in on that for the world. I thought being happy was drunken behavior, because the only time I'd ever been happy was when I was drinking. And without the 12 steps, the only time I'm going to be happy is maybe after I'm dead. Because wishing I could drink is not going to make me happy. Did I drink a lot? Well, I didn't give you my drunk-a-log. I used to give a hell of a drunk-a-log. But now I talk about the steps a lot. A lot of people think I talk about them too much. Well, I don't know why. It's the only program we've got. Here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. I grabbed onto that word, suggested. I mean, I didn't have to do it. I failed to notice there's not another suggestion in the book. There's nothing in there about turning down alcohol. There's nothing in the book about turning down the first drink. There's nothing in there about using my willpower not to drink. There is a statement that working the 12 steps is the proper use of the will. It didn't say one of the proper uses, the proper use. And what do I do when I use my willpower to force myself to do the steps? I turn my will over to the care of God. And then God's in charge instead of me. What am I turning it over to? Is this a religious program? At the risk of offending a few people, I'm going to prove it's not a religious program. I was the officer of a church when I came to AA. I wouldn't go to AA meetings. They would have kicked me off the board. Being the officer of a church and teaching Sunday school didn't keep me sober. Did I try to stop drinking? Once in a while. Did it work? Not for damn long. So when I came to this program, I was an extremely religious man, and I thought I knew exactly who God was. I had a definite picture of who God was. Today, 41 years after I came to AA, 35 years since I started working the steps. After my one and only, I only got drunk once for 3 months. I thought I could handle it. I didn't resist alcohol for 3 months. I drank it for 3 months. And then I called AA. A little kid, 3 years old, came up to me after a church service just before Christmas. It was on a Sunday morning, the 23rd. It was the church's, in Hayward, church's Christmas service. And those of us on the board of officers proved our humility that day by wearing plastic carnations and ushering and serving the communion and taking the collection to show how humble we were. And I had a green mouth because chlorophyll was the way to kill breath at that time. And I went home and I lay on the couch, and my little 3-year-old son, little blonde kid, comes over and says, "Daddy, the other kids have asked me to ask you not to do something on Christmas." And I said, "What, Jonathan?" He says, "The other kids have asked me to ask you not to drink on Christmas." And I got up and I called AA. And that's the boy that died at age 35. He got me back into AA, but he couldn't get himself into the 12 steps. A lot of people know that the 12 steps take away the desire to drink. Some of us get the notion that they're supposed to make us happy, joyous, and free 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. I guarantee you it's not true. That's bullshit. All the bad things that are going to happen whether I'm drunk or sober. The only thing is, I won't have as much time to have bad things happen if I continue to drink. I'll die. So the longer I live, the more I'm exposed to the people on this earth who do not turn their will and their lives over to the care of God and can do very bad things that will hurt. One of them kidnapped my granddaughter 4 years ago, poly class. We hunted for weeks, 9 weeks. All my training was in the media. I have a degree in public relations. We conducted the vastest, most complete, biggest worldwide media hunt for a missing person in the history of the world. All the military worked for us, all the police departments, the truck drivers, the motorcycle riders, the horse people, everybody was looking for my granddaughter. and she was dead before we started looking. I went to meetings. Did it make me feel like drinking? Of course not. When you work the 12 steps, there's nothing more obscene that can occur in your mind than the idea that I'm going to do something to feel better because someone I love is in jeopardy or dying or dead. Why the hell would anybody want to feel better when somebody they love is in trouble? Only an asshole would want to feel better at a time like that. And only alcohol can make an alcoholic into an asshole. So, I didn't think about drinking. Payless Drugstore offered us free prescriptions, and the doctors offered us free prescriptions. And to this day, we could get them, I guess. I didn't take any prescriptions. What the hell do I want? To dull my senses? Do I feel bad about what happened to the little girl and what happened to my son? Of course I do. I'm going to appear in court this coming week with a woman whose 12-year-old daughter was beaten to death by a neighbor 4 weeks ago. Does she feel bad? What do I tell her? Go ahead, feel terrible. Grief is the only possible way to stay in touch with the people you love after they're gone. You don't want to get over that. How do I know this? The only thing I get out of the 12 steps is serenity, which can be called sanity. If I'm working the 12 steps, terrible things can happen. But I won't do anything stupid if I'm working the 12 steps. I'll do the best that can be done, no matter how miserable the circumstances. Because God will make me feel like doing what He wants me to do. Can I put somebody else in the care of God? No. Each of us has to do that for ourselves. Can I pray for someone else? Sure. Providing I pray only for knowledge of His will for us and the power to carry that out and not tell God what good things or bad things He should do for someone else. It took me 2 years in an Al-Anon meeting. I've learned some of the greatest things I've learned in Al-Anon. In Mill Valley, I was going to have kids over for Christmas, my grandchildren, 4 of them. We hadn't had Christmas since before Polly. Well, we had a Christmas tree in Petaluma, but that wasn't Christmas. People brought 400 or 500 angels. There wasn't any organized angel thing. Everybody brought ornaments. They were all angels. I call them Polly's angels. I call the people that help Polly's angels. I call the newspaper people, the cops. All of them are Polly's angels. The people that sympathize with us, try to support us, Polly's angels. Serenity isn't worth a damn until there's a disaster to use it on. We don't even know we've got it if things are going our way. How the hell would I know if I have serenity if everything I want is coming true? The only way I can find out is if something awful happens and I don't go crazy. It isn't whether I drink or not. That would be the dumbest thing I could do. But I don't have to worry about that. But I'm not going to make mistakes in any area of life that's important in a crisis. Any member of AA who is working the 12 steps has 2 things going for him. God and the desire that God gives him to help other people. There's nobody better to have around in time of crisis than an AA member. who is working the 12 steps. The third day of the search for Polly, there was a lawyer, not an AA, who was volunteering his time, sticking pins into a map of California for places that were asking for flyers with Polly's picture on them and the sketch of the composite of the person that took her. And he was putting these maps all over the state of California. He must have had 150 maps, 150 pins on the map. He turned around and he says, "What the hell are Alano clubs?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "About half of these are people that want flyers sent to something called Alano clubs." And I thought for a minute, God, I didn't know that many people knew me. But it wasn't that at all. They didn't know me. They just know somebody needed help. That's all. And people in AA who are in recovery know that the main purpose of living is to help other people. And there is no pleasure better than giving pleasure. We find that out here. And we got to learn to feel bad so we can feel good. Because if you can't feel bad, you can't feel anything. So AA is a wonderful place to grow up and learn the lessons Mama never taught us. AA has done a hell of a lot more than save my life. I used to wonder what I was going to do when I retire. I left ABC, the American Broadcasting Company, KGO, in 1979. My God, that's a long time ago. 19 years ago? I'm still wondering what I'm going to do when I retire. I've written 7 books since then. I haven't written a book since Polly was kidnapped. But I signed a contract a couple of months ago for a movie on a book I wrote 27 years ago, and they want me to write another one. I just came back from Washington, Williamsburg, and New York. I have a daughter living on Long Island, and we took these 7- and 8-year-old little kids down to I called somebody in Washington and says, "Can I get the kids into the Easter egg rolling on the White House lawn?" The answer was no. Then I asked somebody else, I said, "Can we get ahead of that big line? I don't like to keep these little kids in line to go through the White House." The answer was no. By the time I checked in Washington, there were phone messages. Somebody said, "Come down to the old executive office building." And I went down there and was handed 10 tickets to the Easter egg roll on the White House lawn. And that night, the 5 of us were taken on a personal escorted tour of the White House after dark. I didn't arrange that. And the answer was no. I even saw Simon Garfinkel was singing at the Easter egg rolling. Hell, I always wanted to see him. Hillary and Bill were there too. I had the little 8-year-old boy up on my shoulders so he could get a good look. 30,000 parents and children. 5 of the people in there were people I gave tickets to that couldn't get any. Off the street, I only needed 5. 30,000 kids and parents? Is that fun for an adult? You're damn right it is. If you're showing a couple of little kids a good time. Somebody in Al-Anon said, "You going to the White House?" I says, "Yeah, I got to get a jacket and tie." She says, "Why?" I said, "Well, the little boy insists on wearing a suit and tie." It's true. The 8-year-old, he wouldn't go to the White House unless he could wear a suit and tie. I said, "I'm not going to let him to be the only one. I don't think the people in the White House wear suit and ties." She says, "You're not going to let an 8-year-old kid dictate what you're going to wear to the White House." I said, "You're goddamn right I am." I wouldn't dream of it. So I carried this jacket, which is not a good thing to travel with, and I had a ball. A wonderful time. I've been there before. I didn't take him anywhere I hadn't been before. Took him on a boat to Mount Vernon. Took him down to Williamsburg. Took him through all those old buildings and things down there. Took him to Busch Gardens. Took him to the Cherry Blossom Festival in Washington. Took him, the kid was writing a paper on Mars, so I took him to the American Museum of Natural History in Washington, and they have a piece of Mars there so he could touch it. Then I had to take him over, show him the Air and Space Museum so he could know where I came from. Got all done. Oh, God, my feet were bloody stumps. Asked the kids what they liked best. Guess what they said? Well, I took them to a show at Ford Theater so I could see a show where Lincoln was shot. Guess what they liked best? Busch Gardens. A theme park run by Anheuser-Busch. The only theme parks in America that serve beer. Well, I went to New York, went to 4 shows on Broadway after I sent the kids back to Long Island. Looked at the playbill. I go to New York now about twice a year. I couldn't do that if I was still drinking. I'd have been dead a long time ago, for that matter. But supposing I'd survived cirrhosis drinking all this time. I looked at the playbill. It used to be I wouldn't go to a play, even though I used to act in plays. I wouldn't go to one because I couldn't get a drink in the theater. In London, you can get a drink in the theater. I like those. There's 27 shows on Broadway and off Broadway right now listed in the playbill, and I've been to 14 of them. Saw a wonderful musical called The Scarlet Pimpernel, and a wonderful new play called The Last Night of Ballyhoo. I think I'm entertaining myself to death. And I'm enjoying things I wouldn't have dreamed of enjoying when I was miserable with alcohol. You know? I've traveled all over the world. I got to help spread AA in Siberia with another group of AA people. I got to go to Lhasa. I got to learn the tambouret in Rangiroa, in Tahiti, and Bora Bora. I got to go see the wild animals in Kenya. I've climbed to the Grail Castle, Montsegur, in the Pyrenees. How in the hell could a drunk do these things? Well, do the steps first, and the steps will take you a long, long way. I didn't have a dime in the bank when I was 50 years old. Now I live in Pebble Beach. What the hell is going on? This is all wrong. I work the steps. And do I give a damn about Pebble Beach? I think it's a pretty place. I'd rather look at deer than people. You know, Pebble Beach is strange. They don't even have AA in Pebble Beach. We have a lot of it in Carmel where we have designer groups. I was at one last night. A person from Los Angeles said, well, when I come to an AA meeting where they serve decaf, herb tea, coffee, grapes, and brie, I know I'm in Carmel. When I first moved to Carmel 17 years ago, I went to my first meeting, and I met a guy who was living in a car. I've known people in AA everywhere that lived in cars, but this guy was living in a Mercedes. Today he drives limousines for a living. There was a little old lady got out of a Mercedes right in front of the meeting, looked down in the gutter in the dark and said, "Oh shit, I just stepped in some doo-doo." That's Carmel. We have designer groups there. Bill said you've got to go away from home once in a while to get away from reality. He wrote that in the big book. If you live in Carmel or Pebble Beach, you've got to go away from home to get to it. I don't know where I'm going. I think I've probably already gone there. But I do want to say that this is not a religious program, if that's holding anybody up. And I can prove it. The difference between the 12 steps and a religion are there are 10 rules, things not to do in a religion in order to prepare our soul for the hereafter. With the 12 steps, there are 12 suggestions of things to do in order to save our ass for right now and put the hereafter off as long as possible. So the difference between the 12 steps in religion is the difference between my soul and my ass, and that's a hell of a difference. In something I wrote, several things I wrote, I said, I don't know what God is. I haven't the foggiest idea anymore. I don't care. I've prayed with Buddhists in AA. I've prayed with Taoists in AA in China. It doesn't make any difference. I'll pray with you, whoever your God is. You want to pray to a goddess? I'll pray with you. Thank God my ego no longer requires that God have the same kind of genitals I have. That's not necessary for me. And who the hell am I to decide what God is or is not? All I know is God is. And in Russia, when a doctor said, "How do you expect us to work the 12 steps?" We're surrounded by 7 different religions in Siberia. Totally surrounded. And when communism ended, they all came in. And here we all are, trained from the cradle that there is no such thing as God, that God is merely something to exploit the poor people with. And says, everybody comes in and says, "You're already working AA?" Well, here's what happened. About 20 years ago, more than 20 years ago, Gorbachev was having a problem with his daughter and a problem with his country. And so he called in Dr. Peter Shakarov, who met with us in a hotel room in Moscow and told us this story. The story was, Gorbachev says, "Why is the SS, Society for Sobriety, not working here?" And the answer was, after Gorbachev studied all studies about alcoholism, because we do everything they do in AA except the 12 steps, which requires alcoholics to believe in God. Gorbachev says, "God?" And Shakarov says, "Well, yes, Mr. Secretary, I know there's no such thing as God, and you know there's no such thing as God. But the alcoholics who recover don't know that. So just believing in God seems to be the only difference between their program and ours, and why theirs works in 120 countries and ours isn't working here." And Gorbachev thinks for a minute and says, "All right, from now on alcoholics and drug addicts can have God, but no one else." And it was the one and only time in the history of the Soviet Union that God became part of an officially endorsed government program. It wasn't Billy Graham or the church people that got God into Russia. It was a bunch of drunks like us. So he says,
This doctor says, how do you expect us to work the 12 steps? The Buddhists say we got to turn our will and our life over to Buddha. The Taoists say it's Tao. The Jews say Yahweh. The Christians say Christ. How do you expect us to do this? The Muslims say Allah. How can we do this if you people from out there can't even agree upon who God is? And there were 7 of us. And we looked at each other and we nodded. And we all agreed. Thank God we all agreed, because this is kind of unusual to have 7 AAs agree about anything. We don't know what God is. The only understanding we have of God is a power greater than ourselves. There is no other definition in AA. A higher power greater than ourselves. They said, you don't know what God is? You're not going to tell us who God has to be? No, we can't. The first 100 people couldn't agree on that. They all had different ideas. The one thing they could agree on, that it is a power greater than ourselves. And you should have seen those atheists convert on the spot the minute they didn't have somebody telling them who God was. So in a book I wrote, I don't care whether God is she, he, it, or they. I wrote a little verse. I call God she, he, it, or they, and God will answer anyway. I may call God by any name, and God will answer just the same. And a guy I sponsored called me up one day. He read it. Long distance call. He says, you know, you solved a big problem for me. I said, what is it? He said, well, every time I get in trouble, I say, oh, Jesus. If it's serious trouble, I say, oh, God. If it's terminal problem, I say, oh, shit. She, he, it, or they spell shit. No matter what I say, I'm talking to God. And I remembered all the pilot's last words. Always the little box records the pilot before he hits the mountain or the ground, or his wings fall off. He always says, oh shit. And it's a spiritual moment. You can believe me. I've been there. I saw a guy at a meeting say, I call my higher power God because that's his fucking name. Another guy said, I got so ticked because my sponsor says, make as if you can't believe it, pretend. He says, I got so sick of going through this hypocrisy that one day I stuck my finger up like that. And my sponsor said, congratulations, you just established your first conscious contact with God. The reason I told you stories like this is not to make you laugh, but to point out that you won't hear stories like that in church. It proves this is not a religion. This is a spiritual program with which we can recover from alcoholism and never, ever want to drink again. Thank you.